Welcome to the Psychedelic Mindscape, a podcast that delves into two fascinating topics, psychedelics and leadership. I'm your host, Victoria Lauren, and today I'm speaking with Rob Sanchez. Rob has 13 plus years in the cannabis industry, specializing in cultivation, cannabis software, product management, and compliance. He's worked for and contributed to 6 different seed to sale and point of sale software companies in cannabis. He also writes for Apartment 113, Nugs Magazine, ILGM, and Sensi Seeds, and is also the host of the Apartment 113 Cannabis and Psychedelics Podcast. Welcome, Rob. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, Victoria. Appreciate you having me on the show. Looking forward to talking a little bit. I've been listening to a few of your episodes, and you've had some great guests on in the past.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I always love this conversation. And I feel like given your background in the cannabis industry, also your experience at, psychedelics, we met at Psycon in Vegas. And then also the product management side of things for yourself. Like, I feel like that is a beautiful intersection of everything that I'm into.
It was a conversation meant to happen.
It was indeed. Yeah.
And Psycon was very interesting. Getting in there and really hearing from everyone, great range of sessions and, a good community and kind of turnout as well. I think maybe not as many attendees as Psycon would have wanted, but for me, I think it was enough.
Yeah. Something nice about having those smaller gatherings, because I feel like it gives you just more opportunities for the more intimate conversations. And I feel like I really formed some relationships at that conference. So that was lovely.
Yeah, a little more than the, handshake business card trade that you get at some conferences.
Exactly. To be honest, any psychedelic trade show has been just a wonderful place for me. I feel like coming from the medical device and health tech background, those trade shows, I just felt like everyone was very formal, very closed off, very guarded, and it's kind of this like, ooh, don't talk to me because you're, what are you trying to sell me on?
Yeah,
and
none of that.
That's just not the case. Yeah, that's just not the case with that group. It's like, it's wonderful.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of cool sessions, from like there was a 5-MeO DMT session I sat in, and then learning about more of the psychedelic assisted therapy side of things is kind of an area of the industry that I'm not too familiar with, but I think an area that's getting traction quickly because of the legal routes, and also because some of the healing they're able to provide people who maybe aren't traditionally psychonauts.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so this is something that I was intending to ask you later in the conversation, but it touches on something that I wanted your take on, because given the way that the cannabis industry has evolved, and now with psychedelics coming online and with kind of the medical model for going to market, I want to know, like, what are you expecting in terms of the next 5 to 10 years? Like, do you think that we're going to end up with a similar, similar to cannabis model with dispensaries, and maybe it's medical license at first, but eventually, open for recreational use? Or do you kind of think, nah, it's just going to stay in the pure medical model? It'll be dosed out in therapeutic settings only. I'd be curious to know your thoughts.
Yeah, that's the crystal ball there that we're all trying to look in, I feel. And, cannabis has stumbled a little bit on its way. And in the beginning of that industry, many people were saying, this substance, this medicine is not going to go the CPG route. It won't be a consumer packaged good. It's not going to be a commodity. It's unique. Cannabis can stand up to capitalism. And now, over 5 years into it, it hasn't. It's very much commoditized. It's become a CPG along the lines of wine or alcohol and things like that. And some of that magic is kind of out of it. That I wonder with psychedelics if its impact is strong enough in the individuals that use psychedelics, if it will actually prevent the industry from growing to be that behemoth. And also, maybe the nature of psychedelic use doesn't lend well to regular all the time consumption. If we go and buy a half ounce of mushrooms from a dispensary, if it were, that's going to take a little while to work through. And you probably aren't going to go back as regular as someone maybe buying a pre-roll or a cartridge that they can kind of smoke throughout their day. So I think that like stronger doses of the substance will probably be medical for a long time. And maybe I think the best outcome there would be some freedom around home grows so that people can cultivate mushrooms and work in that side of the plant medicine space personally, but while still having some kind of more facilitated outlet for those who aren't going to go down that path. I think for MDMA and some of the stronger psychedelics, it's probably going to stay on the therapy side for a while before
Yeah.
we see anything. The one piece of the puzzle that might kind of lean towards that commoditization is the microdosing. Making like a pack of already dosed chocolates or mints or something like that. The way that some of these ketamine therapy companies are doing it too, that might be enough to build a business on and somewhat of an industry. But I kind of hope it stays on the sidelines for a little while and doesn't really go down that cannabis industry path, at least not too fast.
Yeah. Yeah. I think given the potential harms associated with those larger doses being taken in an uncontrolled setting probably means that it will, stay in that more controlled environment. And I do believe personally it's interesting, being in this world because I consider myself a very spiritual person, and I incorporate psychedelics and plant medicine into that practice of spirituality. And at the same time, I come from a biomedical engineering background and worked in healthcare and medical device. And, so worked not directly for, but worked with a lot of big pharma. And so it's funny to me because there's a lot of members of my community that really hate big pharma and everything that it represents, right? In terms
Uh,
of capitalism, in terms of self suppression and, emotional regulation through numbing out. And I can completely respect that view. And I also believe that without that model where you have very controlled extraction methods and precisely, what the dosing is, and you have the support and access to medical care should you need it, psychological care, if it's in that psychedelic assisted therapy setting. To me, if we're going for big impact, then we kind of need to work with the model that already exists and how society runs.
yeah, kind of the support structure of that, just spinning out these psychedelic dispensaries is bound to lead to some interesting news articles that that I think we could avoid, and people could test things out in a safer way. And I think, recreational use probably isn't going to be affected by the way the above the board, programs are rolling. I think that'll probably keep trucking on forever. Just people have a way to make that happen. But it is interesting to think about, that just staying in as a psychedelic assisted approach or more of a therapeutic setting, or the ceremonial settings that like ayahuasca and like combo have. I think at least make sure there's a guide there to help you, that you don't get stuck. You don't
Right.
find your way into a weird place.
Yeah.
About 2 years ago, Benzinga had a psychedelics conference. I went to that all like gung ho, ready to meet some folks and thinking I would find kind of the Psycon approach. But I was very surprised, as it was a suited and booted appearance, and it was all about the like kind of medicinal discoveries and potential like pharmaceutical applications of psychedelics, and also about starting to prove or digging deeper into the studies that MAPS has done around therapy, and proving MDMA and looking at like its use for PTSD. Or there was a big session on ketamine and its use for suicide prevention. And just it was a different angle entirely. And as a like kind of a culture guy, I was a little like a little bit disappointed, I think. But at the same time, I could see like the amount of healing that those big functioning traditional machines could really roll out, across the nation or the world. And I to build that from scratch is going to have a lot of stub toes and bruises.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That sounds like a really, yeah, that would have been a very interesting group and an interesting
Yeah.
approach. But that's where I like to spend my time, as kind of that bridge between. I think that, given my corporate background and my comfort in those, suit and tie settings, and also having a reverence for the indigenous, ceremonial use of plant medicine, I like to think of myself as, a conduit or a bridge between those two worlds. So I always like to say that, I'm working to bring nature's wisdom to the corporate jungle.
Yeah, right. Introducing some invasive species while you're there.
Right. Exactly. But to go back to what you said about microdosing and that potentially taking a similar path to ketamine, like at home delivery services, I could definitely see that being a route that a company might take, because right now, like, I'm based in Oregon, which we have access to legal psilocybin through Measure 109, which ends up being dispensed through a licensed service center that purchases from a licensed manufacturer, and the session itself is facilitated by a licensed facilitator. So there's a lot of, I'll tell you, there's about 20 forms that you have to fill out to prepare, to go on this journey. And it can be cost prohibitive for certain individuals. So I still believe, that there is very much a need for the unlicensed model that is perhaps a little more accessible for people. So,
Yeah.
but what I'm thinking about with microdosing is that you can go to one of these service centers and you can take a microdose, and then you're required to remain on site for 30 minutes. Essentially, make sure that nothing weird happens, and then you're allowed to go on your day. But obviously, driving somewhere every day or every couple of days, depending on the protocol that you're following, that can be disruptive, to just go and sit in an office for 30 minutes while you wait.
Yeah. Especially with how long some of the microdosing could take. I mean, its effects are pretty subtle if
Yeah.
you're doing it right. So it's a lot of rigmarole and maybe cost around that isn't really meshing well. Like at this, on the other side of the coin, I can see the macro doses, the hero doses. If you want to have like a 4 gram trip, maybe having somebody there or making sure you're safe, going through the paperwork feels more worth it, because what you're getting out of it is more of a true experience, or a mindset change, rather than the kind of long form medicinal aspect or on the microdosing side.
Yeah, exactly. I'm curious, do you currently have a microdosing practice for yourself, or
Uh,
what's your
kind
take
of.
on that?
Yeah,
Mhm.
I don't have too much of one, but occasionally, maybe like once a month or every other month, on Saturdays, microdose with my wife and just kind of relax or like reconnect to you know ourselves and what we're trying to do in life, or just be lazy and watch a movie or something. It's kind of changed, I think, over the years. I did have a more programmatic process for a few months, maybe about 4.5 years ago, for 3 months, maybe 3.5 months. Every 3 days, I took zero point 0.3 grams, measured out, and just went about my daily life. Really trying not to get like trippy or in a different mindset, but just allowed the medicine to do its work. And I did find a great relief with that, and found that it kind of pushed me into some things that I had wanted to do for a long time, but not taken the steps, or maybe just not had the commitment needed to see them through.
I'm curious to know. Tell me more about what that change was. Like, where were you? What was the kind of the block that you were facing? And then, yeah, where did you end up? What was that change in the end?
Yeah, at the time I was in Minneapolis, at the original apartment 113 of Lore now, and participating and hanging out in a very like party scene. Psychedelics and things were used in a kind of like hedonistic way, for lack of better words. Mixed and matched and combined, and some people were making their living off of them. So it was a different lifestyle than maybe I had intended to ever fall into, but it was comfortable. At the same time, I had other dreams that I wanted to do with business and with income or family life and things like that, that I wasn't maybe taking the right steps towards. I also have a tendency to be a very hardcore stoner and fall into cannabis use. Um, I enjoy the heck out of it. I mean, it's great, and I would never bash anybody for smoking all day every day, because I do at times. But sometimes it can really fog things up or slow down the actions there. And microdosing helped me to go a very long period of time without cannabis, and to try to kind of reframe my approach there, and to just kind of believe in myself more. That I could take those steps or have my toe in the psychedelia waters while I still do my other things. It didn't have to be an all the time commitment or a constant festival circuit to still have those moments of enlightenment and that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful. Because I think that, when you spend all of your time or too much time in we'll say in the psychedelic realm, then you don't really have the downtime afterwards for processing, for integrating, for looking at, okay, what are the insights that I'm taking away from that journey, and how am I going to be modifying my behaviors? And this is something that I end up talking to a lot of clients about, whether they decide to work with psychedelics or not, because in the end, we end up being our worst enemies. We are the ones that we pick our direction, our north star. We're like, this is where I'm going. This is the goal that I've set for myself. And then we self sabotage and we distract ourselves and we put all these roadblocks up. And a lot of that, it stems from beliefs that we hold about who we are or what our role in the world is. And I think that with psychedelics, it can provide that immediate, perspective shift or mindset transformation that then really needs to be followed up with new behaviors, new actions that get
Yeah,
reinforced until they become habitual.
definitely. Yeah, the analogy I like to use for psychonautic experiences is kind of pulling up the anchor on your reality. And most experiences, that anchor lands, nearby. You kind of still understand the landscape. But with significant experiences, you could find that it's landed quite far, and it takes a while to get your bearings again. So I don't know, with more regular or heavier use, you can kind of lose track of where that anchor's really been, and kind of get into a funk or into a weird space with it where it's still enjoyable. You still have those moments of enlightenment or the connection with community and things like that. But life can kind of fall. And that integrative process is definitely key. Really enjoyed, I enjoyed journaling before psychedelics, but especially found that like a daily stream of consciousness kind of thing helped to just reset. Or after powerful experiences, I would end up like calling someone in my family. My little brother got a few calls from me that were probably weird, um, the next day, to just kind of like level set again and talk about something normal, instead of whatever just happened.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that you weren't making phone calls to him during the journey. I have heard of people doing that, and folks, just don't call your family. Even if you really want to tell them how much you love them, just don't call them if you're tripping.
Yeah, just make a mental note and do that tomorrow.
Right, exactly. Mental note, tell my family I love them tomorrow.
But that kind of integration, I think, is necessary to build those habits that you were talking about, that or either build the habits that you need or break down the habits that weren't really benefiting you, and to kind of take those next steps. And I think it's
Exactly.
not everyone uses psychedelia to self improve. I think there's also some escapism in the scene, or in that habit or lifestyle. And I think finding a good balance is definitely needed, because I can't say that it's you would never want to escape, or maybe never just challenge your psyche, but it should be doing something for you. I mean, and maybe that's just my mindset around kind of all things. I've always been a fan of like self improvement, self discipline, trying to maintain good routines and things like that. So it could be hard for people to switch their minds to that. But I think for anyone coming to psychedelics fresh, the industry that's building up already is showing a good sign. It seems like they really are trying to support people, trying to put them into situations where they're in control in a safe setting, or not, and maybe not without the help that they would need during, before, or after, that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think that at least what is coming up for me when you say that is whether or not you're bringing intention to the practice, of whatever that practice is. And this is something that I end up exploring quite a bit with clients because, sometimes people will, they'll take a blameless inventory of themselves and share the various ways that they are self-sabotaging, and there can be a lot of judgment or a lot of shame that arises with that. It's like, oh, here's my escapism behavior, whatever it is, and maybe it's food, maybe it's TV, maybe it's social media, right? Like there's so many different things that you can escape with. And when we bring judgment or shame that we layer on top of that, it doesn't support us in our growth or in our transformation process. And so I end up spending a lot of time working with people and kind of changing their relationship to it. And so it's saying, hey, I am not a coach that says get rid of all of your bad habits, right? Or the habits that you feel are impeding you. Because, first of all, just trying to resist doing something is a sure way to continue doing it, right? Because what you resist persists. So, I'm
Mm.
not a fan of squashing down, but rather if you are feeling really overwhelmed, anxious, depressed, whatever's going on in life that's hard, that's difficult, and you need to cope and you want to go to that coping mechanism, it's taking a pause and saying, I recognize that the behavior that I am about to engage in is not one that I necessarily want to rely on a regular basis, but I'm giving myself permission to numb out in this way because I'm just done. I'm done with, whatever it is that's been super stressful. So to me, it's like, can you bring intention even to the practices that you might have formerly judged about yourself? And then you give yourself permission to just enjoy it, like fully be present and enjoy it. To me, it's problematic when it becomes mindlessly habitual, right?
Yeah, and then you're not getting that value, or just being in the present, or being here now, right? The Ram Dass way.
Exactly. Exactly. So,
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it, I think. And with psychedelics specifically, maybe with other forms of escapism, it's not truly about leaving that valley and escaping somewhere else. It's more about just climbing higher to get a better perspective on where you are. And I think
yes.
that's a good way to kind of look at it. Nowadays, anything that I take has very clear intentions. If I'm with folks, I even speak them aloud, get a little cheers in, or something like that. So it's good to see the psychedelic assisted therapy approach, making sure to set those clearly and making sure their clients or their patients are aware and kind of in tune with what this will be. Um, that being said, I think I'm a little weary of psychedelic assisted therapy, as
Ooh, really? Tell
I
me
don't
why.
know that I don't know that I want to spend prolonged periods of time investigating anything with a therapist on psychedelics. Like with psychedelia, it could be a roller coaster of emotions, and you could be down for a minute and then find yourself elated the minute after. But to have to then like talk about that down part or live in that where the medicine may be taking you elsewhere, I feel kind of colors the journey, or it could maybe be very affected by that facilitator and by how much
Mm.
they're talking with you or trying to therapy or to do their dance.
Right. Yeah. And it's true that different people will have different approaches. I know for Oregon, like our facilitators work, the licensed facilitators work with a non directive approach, which essentially
Uh,
means you are not speaking.
oh,
You
so it's not really you're not laying on the couch talking throughout the whole trip.
No, no, and even in the clinical trials, at least the ones like the recordings that I've watched of various sessions, it's if someone feels the need to talk, there was actually it's interesting in the psilocybin ones, there was essentially no talking. It was just the person, eye mask, headphones, like they're just having their own experience with the music. And then working with the therapist afterwards to integrate it. It's different though with MDMA. The MDMA sessions, people are a little more vocal. They get up, they move around, right? There's a little more energy there, and from what I could see, it was the therapist kind of validating whatever the person was saying, inviting them to explore it deeper, kind of asking them to like go into the feeling, go into if it was a really scary place, then it was reminding them, hey, I'm here with you. We can go together, that type of thing. So,
That's a good. That's definitely welcoming to know that some of them are more personal still or introspective. But I
yeah,
definitely see how the MDMA one can't be that because that's when it's time to talk and chat and move and get some energy out. Uh,
exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
but having someone there if and when you need to just redirect, I think is why a lot of the culture or the community would recommend like sitters and people just being around, if they realize you're stuck or something, they can play a good song or change the environment, turn the lights on or turn them off, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Now
I
I
do
know
love
that
to see the progress so far, I guess, across the states. I know decriminalized nature is pushing more cities into allowing therapy, and even moving into some home grow kind of laws for mushroom cultivation and plant medicine. So I feel like we're like right about to turn the corner.
yeah, yeah, and I'm very curious to see what happens this month in particular with MDMA. Because I
Right.
feel like that's going to really set, just the entire precedence and that whole idea of submitting a new drug application that is a substance, a compound combined with psychotherapy. Like, that hasn't been done before.
More people having psychotherapy is probably not a bad thing for society overall. Yeah.
I'll agree with you there.
Just more, right, more time spent introspective, more kind of coaching moments or time to look back and understand who you are, or even just ways to be happier with the way life is. I know it can be hard to start wanting and needing, so psychedelia has a way of introducing content.
Yes. Yes, it does. It does. Because I do think that a lot of people's behaviors and just, the whole acquisition, consumption culture that we see, right? It's like you keep trying to fill this hole, not realizing that these materials can never do that for you. It's just kind of this bottomless pit.
Yeah, I think there's a term for it, the hedonic treadmill. Like as you get on the treadmill, you're happy, but once you walk on it a while, you want to go faster. You still want something else, and people have a way of getting to that treadmill too fast in every new thing that they do, and always kind of planning, the next step,
Yeah,
which is
exactly.
probably good for life, but sometimes our brains work against us that way.
They can. And I think there's also a difference between, planning for a next step versus moving the goalpost. Because this is something that I end up talking to a lot of executives about, which is the question of what is success? When do you know that you've made it? When is it enough? Because if you're not writing that down for yourself, if you're not taking some time to think about your vision of this, successful future that you're working towards, then our minds have a way of just continuously moving the goalpost. And one person jokingly, but also perhaps not, said, "Well, when my big boat has a little boat to go with it, that's when I know that I've reached enough."
Setting some big goals there.
Yes, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's something that I don't even know that I could provide a concise answer for that, on really what is enough or what is that satisfaction. Kind of, you know it when you see it, or you should know it. But I think it takes some work to boil that down, to try to write, okay, these are all the things that I want or all the things that I would need, and then try to sift through that to find what is it really. I think as I kind of like moved through different scenes, I've kind of settled on a more humble goals of just wanting stability and you know being able to afford things for my family, and just kind of to have life be without major disruptions, and
Yeah,
just trying to be grateful for that. Other things that happen on the work or other project front, I think are added benefits, and I definitely have my wants in those avenues, but I think it's helped to try to separate like personal or family wants and needs from those project or like kind of work based endeavors.
yeah,
They
yeah,
have a way of intertwining, for me at least, where it's suddenly like I don't know what I'm doing, or I'm just doing way too many things and forget to eat, or I have my wife helping me out with a work project and we don't take the time needed to just do life, and
yeah.
be.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, and to be honest, that whole exercise of defining success and, like writing down this is when it's enough. A lot of the times, I end up challenging people once they've written it down of, okay, like that's great. Now we've got, some concrete goals of what we're looking to accomplish over, maybe that's the next 5, 10, however many years. But then it's, what if you were to take that sense of everything is okay right now, or that sense of everything is abundant right now, and then trying to work with that sensation of completeness or fullness?
Yeah, that's definitely something that I think without psychedelics I was struggling with, for sure. There's something that it introduces, some connection to humanity or just to yourself, that kind of you are enough, or this is enough. I think it's, even if it doesn't bring it, it can give you glimpses of that the integration and things like that can help you work towards or help you kind of find on your own
Yeah.
afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Hmm.
beautiful. Well, I want to make sure that we save some time to talk about your work as well. So let me shift
Definitely.
gears. Yeah. Okay. So you're Chief Product Officer at Toke, which is a next generation cannabis software. I'd love to know, what is it that you guys are doing? And then, I also know you're a Scrum Master, you're into the agile approach. So, yeah, just kind of talk me through that.
Yeah, for sure. So Toke is a dispensary software. And it allows you to track customers, do inventory management, stay compliant with the state, maintain your sales, profit margins, and really just run the business. It ties in the state compliance systems to a more easy to use interface, and also pulls features out of legacy ERPs like Microsoft and SAP, who build these like multi-decade massive software platforms that are wonderful. I actually really like what those feature sets provide, but that's been my job to work in that feature set. So for many business owners, they need to hire someone almost specifically to use those programs. So Toke has taken a different route by keeping things very user friendly, quick to set up, quick to troubleshoot and understand, so that your current employees or you as the business owner can do the work without that Microsoft consultant or the invoice that comes along with it. We have the dispensary software itself, an e-commerce solution, as well as a digital menu and some customer retention features that let businesses really operate, but also start to excel or improve, make sure they retain their good customers and things like that.
Yeah. I have to tell you, in a previous lifetime when I was working in corporate, I worked with SAP and it
Ah,
was a nightmare. I was like, how can anyone operate with this system? And it was like, I don't know what model it was or what version it was, but wow, was
they are
it
beasts.
it was a beast. It was a beast. It was so difficult to use. It was really confusing. And yes, it had every single feature, every single piece of information that you could possibly want. But just trying to navigate it was, I mean, it took me months to learn it.
Yeah, yeah. And I had even had a job for a while where I was training the people to learn it, and I would be learning things while trying to teach at the same moment. So it was pretty difficult to roll with those. And I think they took an approach where it's like, instead of solving specific business problems, just solve them all. Just
Yeah.
solve every single known business problem that exists and put it into one. And it's allowed them to build the businesses that they are today. But it does help with that use. It does hinder the usability and kind of the customer experience. Where I think at this point, as the CPO, I really look at solving like nuanced business problems. Like, we are looking just within the cannabis industry. These are our personas of the type of users who we have, and this is the information that they need out of that morass of possible business work. So that's been a lot of fun to try to be that funnel, taking input from stakeholders, from the marketplace itself, competitors and customers, and really distilling down just those drops of hopefully value that we can build and provide something great.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me about the whole agile approach. You had mentioned to me before that it's like you kind of break things up into these 2-week chunks where you're trying to deliver some kind of value in that limited
Yes.
scope.
Yeah. So I really enjoy systems, like process or rules. I was that kid always reading the rule book, but maybe never really playing the game. I just got enough out of that. So in work life and in business, I encountered a lot of businesses that were chaotic internally, leading to a lot of office politics, a lot of missed expectations and strangeness. That when I discovered, I didn't discover it, but when I stumbled upon Agile and Scrum, which are two kind of processes to get complex work done, I was hooked from day one. And just because they provide a framework to do hard things and to work within groups and churn out value. And yeah, as you mentioned, they use an iterative process. So you can run longer sprints, but the recommended length is 2 weeks. So you decide what you would be doing for the next 2 weeks and work with the teams to get that done. There's a few different check-in meetings throughout, but most importantly is when you finish the 2 weeks, you review everything you did compared to what you planned and kind of look back to adjust to plan those next 2 weeks forward. So it,
So that reflection period that you were describing, like with psychedelics and journaling after a journey as a
yeah,
part of integration, you're doing that.
it's in some way it's like team integration,
Yeah.
and the other part of Scrum is that it's not really about the business as a whole when you're getting complex work done. It's about the individuals on the team and making sure that their voices are heard, making sure that they're psychologically safe enough to innovate, ask the questions that they need, and participate on the team to churn out that value. Because businesses have a way of assuming at times, and different roles do this more than others, but they assume they know it all. And that kind of assumption can lead people astray or end up building a very rigid system that your creative thinkers and the people doing that complex work just don't thrive in. So Scrum really focuses on building up solid teams of individuals and making sure everyone has their role, but has a say and has a piece in the process.
Well, it sounds like you actually do quite a bit of coaching or facilitation work yourself in that sense, then.
Yeah, definitely. It's meant to be more of a servant leadership role, so that you're really helping others kind of get that work done, get the information that they need, and yeah, facilitating some different meetings throughout the process. Some pre-sprint meetings called backlog refinement, where you look back and see, all right, this is this giant laundry list of stuff that we want to do someday. Then playing the product management game and prioritizing that based on everyone's wants and needs and making sure it's clear what needs to be done before we check in kind of regularly throughout that sprint to answer questions, gauge the progress. Are we getting enough done every day to kind of finish this sprint, or should we commit to less next week? And those kinds of things to just keep it adapting. And that kind of iterative process helps us take in new information. And as we're not assuming we know everything, which is actually a competitive advantage with agile teams, because then when new information comes to bear or we find something, we're ready to adapt to that in the next sprint. And it's not really disrupting this long form project plan that is maybe more how you build a skyscraper. Building that, you need to know exactly your materials, the time frame, when the electrician needs to come versus the concrete guys, and all of that. Agile is for mostly digital projects and other types of things like that that don't have as rigid of guidelines. It's all
Yeah.
about incremental value delivery.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been interesting. I've noticed for some individuals that say they work in a kind of big corporate environment that does use that, like, okay, we're going to plan this out step by step from start to finish 3 years down the line. And then
Yeah.
taking that individual and putting them into a startup environment that is working with this iterative agile process, they can really struggle because they want to do the full, I want to see the vision, I want to do all the pre-planning, and then as new information comes to light, they're not able to incorporate that or innovate on that. So
Yeah, there's an agile mindset that you kind of need to adopt over time. And for anyone rolling out agile for a company or kind of acting as the coach in that regard, it takes time and repetition. And there are some folks whose kind of mode of operation just is not that. So there's some degree of like discomfort with just saying we only know up until Saturday and we'll plan Monday, on Saturday. Like we're like, just don't plan it now.
exactly.
Um, it's a
Yeah,
little
it's
bit
like,
of an art and a science to roll that out successfully. I know some people can be too rigid, even with sticking to
yeah,
that framework, and not
yeah,
allow their teams to kind of expand upon it or find what works. Some of the certifications I've taken would probably cringe at that statement because they like to think that they know everything and that the one way to roll out Scrum is the way that Scrum Alliance has designed it. But, it's hard to know. I mean, I think there's maybe taking a little bit of your own medicine that's needed there to understand that teams are different, and the combinations of ego and personality and people on the teams can lead to different processes being needed, or even in my cases, I have dev teams that are overseas. So, time zone, cultural barriers, like
Right.
there's always little obstacles in the way of rolling out that smooth software delivery.
Exactly. You got to be ready for the uncertainty and the ambiguity.
Yeah, yeah. There's a quote by Ursula K. Le Guin in a sci-fi book that she wrote called "The Left Hand of Darkness," and it is the only thing that makes life possible is permanent, intolerable uncertainty, not knowing what comes next. And it is a frustrating quote, but a motivating one at the same time because
And
you're
very
doing it
true.
right.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, thanks for diving into that, Rob. I want to know just, kind of looking into the future, anything that you're excited about, anything that you've got in the works coming up.
Yeah, we've got so I'll be up at Emerald Cup for the cannabis industry. It's the Northern California competition and celebration of some of the best grown cannabis in the U.S. And it's always a little bit of a party or celebration for the legacy scene and some of the newer businesses in the space. That's going to be here later this month. And then in October, I'll be emceeing the conference room for the Awakening conference put on by the Psychedelic Institute of LA. So that's out in, I think it's at the York Conference Center, but we have 2 days of speakers and an exhibition hall, as well as some plant healing and medicinal ceremonies kind of planned throughout those 2 or 3 days.
Oh, wow. That sounds like fun. Maybe I should be looking into this.
Yes, October 4th and 5th. Let me double check. October 5th and 6th is when it
Okay.
is. It's at York Manor in LA.
Awesome.
Going really from I think 10 to 8 each day with some music and some healing along the way, but some good folks coming in to talk about their projects and kind of push the industry forward. I think it'll be a good time to have good conversation and hopefully build that same energy that Psycon had, where we had people kind of from across the space, not just the business or just the enthusiasts, but kind of find that middle ground.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
then where can people connect with you or tune in?
Yeah, definitely. So LinkedIn, I'm pretty active over there. You can find me just Rob Sanchez. You'll see the guy with dreads. And then on Instagram, it's APT_113 for apartment 113. It's also apartment113.com. And the business toke is gotoke.io. But I'd be happy to show anyone a demo or just to connect online.
That sounds fantastic. Well, thank you so much for taking the time, Rob. Appreciate the conversation.
Hey, definitely. Yeah. Thank you for having me on the show. It was awesome to talk with you and dig into all things psychedelics and a little bit of business. I think that's the line I like to walk.
Fantastic. Me too.